I've addressed this nonprofit because a lot of people say, well, why is your nonprofit called Fashion for Life, and what does it have to do with human trafficking? And I tell people that human trafficking is really attacking the society as we know it, the fabric of our society. And with me, I took the two things that I was passionate about. I was very passionate about fashion before my daughter went missing. And so I wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing, I used that platform that would allow me to have a stage. Fashion it speaks. Your clothes speak. I mean, you can wear something. I think we're more united by what we wear than we are divided. And so we were able to produce Bermuda Fashion Week, where we were able to have a platform to bring out global awareness. Hawaii Fashion Week. Stars and celebrities are really getting involved with human trafficking, and sometimes you have to have a little perk for them. So a nice little bag or a nice little dress will get them to use their voice to speak on such an ugly topic that we are all covering with something. So we're excited to be moving forward with her recovery and our programs that we have. We also, before I don't know how much time I have, I really believe that with law enforcement, I really would love to see the police department really address young girls with the mentality that first, they may be a victim. Shadi was arrested when she was 16 years old, and she looked like she was 10. She had a fake ID of someone that looked totally different from her. She's light in complexion. This person was dark in complexion. But if the person who did the intake when she was arrested had just had a little bit of a heart and had a little bit of care and not just feeling so overworked and overloaded that this is somebody this girl is bad, or she's nasty, or she's a prostitute, and took all the judgmental, then they would have been able to see, first of all, number one, the physical, it didn't line up, and number two, they would have been able to ask more questions. So I would like to see the officers, those who are in positions to actually maybe think backwards, and I don't know if this is proper to say, but maybe think, that the person may be in trouble before, or guilty, of being human trafficked before proven innocent. Maybe kind of flip the roles, because she was arrested, and DeKalb County Police Department let her bail out on her own regardless back to her pimp. So, we had a lot of issues. The bonding company, Atlanta Bonding Company, is where actually the case was broken. On that Wednesday night. The bonding companies, some of them, I would say this one because this is a fact, Atlanta Bonding Company was involved in that case because the pimps were using the bonding company in cahoots with the fake IDs, with the fake signatures to be able to help get these girls out. So it's going to take a community to really get involved, but that bonding company is where the takedown happened. I'll just go back to that Wednesday night before I close. Shadi had called me while she was missing, and she called me from a number. The young lady, I talked to her like Kiva said. She called me, Mom, Mom, Mom. And before you know it, I'm asking too many questions, like I'm on a movie or something. Where are you? What are you doing? Da, 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 da. Talking too much, and I didn't get enough information. She hung up the phone. I called that young lady back. She said that Shadi just used her phone. She didn't know her. Long story short, that Wednesday night, I found that number, and I called her back, and come to find out that lady that answered the phone, she said, I'm so sorry, I lied to you 6 months ago. I knew where your daughter was the whole time. I was actually one of the girls that was holding her. But I got saved, thank God for Jesus, turned my life around, and I've been praying that you called me back every day since the day I gave my life to Christ. And she said, because I owe you. And she said, and for that, I have been keeping my ear to the streets. And I know that if you didn't call today, it must be a miracle that you called today, because they're going to sell her and a group of girls to a trafficker out of New York. So she knew that they were going to the bonding company. She knew because she kept her ears to the street. And that's where I was able to call my Denzel Washington and tell them with the whole thing. And they had the helicopters. It was like FBI, the whole chips and stuff. They had the whole thing going. the whole sting going on, and they were able to bust Atlanta Bonding Company and bust those traffickers there, and that's how they were able to free those girls right before they were getting ready to take them to New York. So 2 things to take away. This is a very heavy subject, and anyone that is dealing with human trafficking, violence, crimes, you have to be able to take a place back, whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation. You need to be able to release a lot of things, and then the second thing is always follow your spirit. Your gut spirit is going to tell you those little butterflies, that intuition is there. We're programmed, we were given that by God. We need to learn to tap into it because it will lead us in the path that are safer for us to travel.
Thank you for your story, for being here. And again, I will just say that path leads wonderfully to Dr. Peters, because Dr. Peters is the medical director at Children's Hospital in the area of, she has the CHIPS clinic. She's medical director for physical abuse at Children's Hospital. Has been on the front lines of this issue for years. And we're really interested in kind of what you have to share about how, as a community, all of us can do a better job of, because we can't recover or rescue if we're not recognizing it, right? Mm-hmm. So can you kind of speak to that about how do we do a better job, not just in the medical community, but all of us, to begin to recognize, listen to those intuition and in some of your experiences in your work at Children's?
Sure. When I'm working with residents and medical students, I tell them, you have a not right meter. There's a not right meter in your brain that picks up when something just ain't right. And part of our job in training doctors is to help them hone that not right meter. We've heard from a number of people, almost every single person that's spoken in the last 2 days, that it is so easy to miss something that's right in front of you. So why is it so easy to miss? If it's right in front of us and we actually encounter it in our daily lives and we just don't see it. And part of that has to do with how we see. If we talk about diagnostic error, making mistakes in diagnosis in medicine, we talk about this a lot. There is one form where you go in and you are looking for certain things, and while you're looking for those things, you actually don't notice the other stuff that might be really, really important to know. And I'd like if you would just indulge me for a moment, if you would close your eyes where you're sitting, and I'd just like to lead you through a very brief little exercise. So as you're sitting, I'd like for you to imagine a victim of human trafficking. This victim is 17 years of age. They are in downtown Birmingham. They're standing alone, and they're holding a bag. Keep your eyes closed, but if you would, some of you probably had an image come up in your head of what that person looked like. If you had some sort of image, didn't have to be clear, but some idea of what that person looked like, raise your hand. So we probably have maybe 30% or so raising their hand. And I think if we had gone, and please feel free to open your eyes, if you go on with an exercise like this, what it does is it tells us when we hear something, we have an image in our mind of what we're looking for. So what are some of those things that we should be looking for that mess us up, that we don't expect a victim to look like? Well, one of the big ones is victims who are male. We talk about female victims, and the majority of victims are female, but there are male victims of trafficking. They're actually harder to count because they are even less likely to be discovered, to disclose that they have been trafficked. Female traffickers. When we think of pimps, most people think of men as being pimps. There are a lot of female traffickers. And so that's another thing that we can miss. The age of the person. You might not think of, for example, a 10-year-old as being someone who could be trafficked for sex. And I've got some sad news for you. That totally happens. Totally happens. Another one would be LGBTQ youth. They are often an unseen and unrecognized group of youth, but they are at very increased risk for being trafficked. A parent being trafficked. As a pediatrician, of course, I take care of children, but I take care of families too. And I've had a couple of episodes where it wasn't the child that was being trafficked. It was the parent that was being trafficked. Another thing as a medical provider, I expect in my work environment, being a pediatric emergency physician, being a child abuse pediatrician, that I'm going to run into commercial sexual exploitation of children. But labor trafficking is not something that is necessarily on my radar all the time. And I have had that show up in my emergency department in the middle of the night. And unless you know to keep your mind open to that being a possibility, realizing your not right meter is going off, and spending a little time trying to figure out why that is, it's very easy to miss this problem. Another thing I'll say is that the media is a major source of how we form that image of what a trafficking victim looks like. And limitations in those cases that are presented in the media can skew our understanding of what trafficking is. And Kiva, I love what you said when you said that this was 15 years ago, that you had your foster child who had been trafficked. This is not a new problem. This is an old problem. I started at Children's 14 years ago. We didn't call it human trafficking, we called it child abuse. And we see kids who may come in because there was a bust, a law enforcement action where there was a bust, children who come in because they were assaulted. We have folks who come in because their families are selling them for sex. This is an old problem that we have an opportunity to see with new eyes. And it's all a matter of how we see and how we leave our brains open to pay attention to those little tiny signals that can tell us that there is something going on, because a lot of these victims have a very good reason not to disclose and to keep this closed in where we don't, as medical providers, don't know it. And fear is one of the big ones. I know we talked a lot about slavery during this conference, how we all have a right not to live in bondage. I also happen to think we all have a right not to live in fear. And fear is one of the major things that keeps kids from disclosing that this is happening. Fear of the trafficker, fear of being placed into foster care or into the DHR system, fear of a number of different things, and that is a major preventer of them to disclose. The last one, because I know we're limited on time, that I'll mention is that there is no reasonable expectation for a medical provider that a victim of trafficking is going to come in and raise their hand and say, hey, I'm a victim of trafficking. There's no reasonable reason to expect that that is going to happen. And that is another challenge that we certainly face, because when we have these cases that come in, we don't know for sure what's going on. I'm the medical provider. I do what I need to do to take care of them. I involve other agencies if that is appropriate or needed or by law required. But we are often not clear on whether there is trafficking or not. This is what I am clear on. People deserve to be loved. They deserve to be living free of fear. They deserve kindness. And sometimes that is the biggest thing as a medical provider that I can give, because I can't fix the fact that somebody has lived a very hard life, but by golly, I can be kind. And sometimes that's the most powerful tool that I have as a medical provider.
Thank you, Dr. Peters. We are right on time of our 30 minutes. But I was taking some notes to just themes, because the survivor care, it is the most challenging piece of this. all of the law enforcement folks, they might say, no, it's the prosecution part, or the DA is the prosecution part, or Carrie over there with a JPO, it's managing a caseload or a docket, but it really is this. It's about the survivor care. And so what I was hearing y'all say is we got to rethink the problem, rethink our lens. I heard you say consistency, and I heard you say relationship. I heard you say love. I heard commitment. I heard collaboration, and I heard community. And I heard care coordination, and how do we do that together? I think the good news about living in Birmingham, living in Alabama versus, say, other parts of this country is that we are all about relationships, and we're small enough that we can collaborate. And I think someone talked about kind of letting stuff go so we can get all that behind and just work on solutions together, and I think we can do that. So the Child Trafficking Solutions Project, we do have something called our Survivor Care Team that we're really, really drilling on this topic, on this solution. So we'd love for y'all to follow up with any of us, and I know each of these ladies would love to talk with you further. But this is, like I say, it's an appetizer. It's really hard work, but we can do it, and we're working on it, right? So I hope we leave today, just mobilized, motivated, and in a year from now we can continue to make an impact. And thank you guys for each of your lives dedicated to this space. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. I mean, you guys are blowing my mind today. So solutions, we just heard survivor care. There's a next part of this as we continue to drill deeper. It is not lost on me that inside this gallery on these walls are the foot soldiers, the people who really stood on the front lines and made a difference, who sacrificed for others and for themselves. And so I just feel that sort of that momentum in this room and that energy. And I hope that as she said, as Jan said, that there's encouragement along the way. This next panel, which will be moderated by Pat McKay with the Alabama Human Trafficking Force, is Law Enforcement Strategy to Combat Trafficking. So as the panelists come up, I'll introduce Teresa Collier, who is an intelligence analyst with the Alabama Fusion Center. Chris Lim, who we heard from earlier, professor at the University of Alabama, running the BEAMS project. Audrey Jordan, who is an assistant attorney general here in the state of Alabama. And Kenneth Stripling, the district director for the Gulf Coast Wage and Hour Division, U.S. Department of Labor, here in the Birmingham district office. And as they all come up, Pat? Oh, there you are. I was like, uh-oh. Okay, here you go. I just want to honor our time. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me in the back? We're going to do this just a little bit differently. Just a little bit about me. Everything's about me, right? No. A little laughter there. I chair a local task force in North Alabama called the North Alabama Human Trafficking Task Force, and I sit on the state task force. I've been doing this fight, or working in this fight, for 9.5 years. As a mother, as a grandmother, as an advocate against it. So we need all of you to do the same, okay? What I'm going to do is ask each of these panelists a couple of questions, and then we're going to move on to the next, sort of a round robin, if you will, and then we'll come back around because I've got more questions. First one is for Teresa from the Alabama Fusion Center. What is the role of the Alabama Fusion Center in the fight against human trafficking, and what actions do you take to assist your law enforcement partners?
Okay. How many folks know what a fusion center is? Anybody in here?
I do.
A couple people do? Okay, well, fusion centers were born out of the attacks of 9/11 when the 9/11 Commission said that there wasn't enough information sharing between federal, state, and local law enforcement, so fusion centers were created out of that. initiative. And so there are 78 fusion centers in the United States. There's one in Alabama. We're located in Montgomery. Some states like California and Florida and Texas have more than one just because they're larger in size and population. So as far as what we do at the Fusion Center, our human trafficking initiative started in 2012. Most fusion centers are all crimes and not just terrorism, and so we at the Alabama Fusion Center, we're an all crimes fusion center, and so when we started this human trafficking initiative in 2012, what we knew was that there wasn't enough training at the local level for law enforcement on human trafficking, exactly what the indicators were, how to investigate a case, and how to help the victims. So our main thing was to take this training statewide. So we've been going over the last 6 years to local police departments throughout the state, and we can do a 2-hour training, we can do a full-day training, we can do a 2-day training, whatever you want. For me, I think my background was a teacher. I used to be a teacher. I'm also a forensic child interviewer, so I kind of have that victim perspective as well. And so for me, the most important thing was to help law enforcement understand we need to look at this problem as a victim-centered and trauma-informed way, because previously I don't think it was looked at as victim-centered and trauma-informed, and so we really try to do that with our training throughout the state.
Thank you. For Audrey, from the Attorney General's Office, Audrey Jordan, what role does the Alabama Attorney General's Office have in the fight to stop human trafficking, and does your prosecutive effort differ from federal and local prosecution?
Well, I think for the Attorney General's Office, much like on the federal level, we have authority throughout the state and are able to prosecute cases throughout the state. And unlike DAs, we also have the capability of pursuing civil actions as well.
Okay. University of Alabama. Yes, Chris Leone. What is your role in the fight against human trafficking? I think we have the answer to that already. What motivated you to get involved? That was easy. What motivated you to get involved in this effort?
Wow, that's a good question. I honestly kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't something that I professionally set out to get involved in. But because the short story would be because I have a background in law enforcement and nonprofit work and all of that, when I was in Los Angeles, I was able to be instrumental in helping some of the work out there.
And your presentation answered about 3/4 of my questions for you, but I'll get back to you on that. Next is Kenneth Stripling, who is our Department of Labor person. What role does the United States Department of Labor have in the fight against human trafficking, and are you authorized to make arrests or take other enforcement actions?
I want to thank with the Wage and Hour Division, which is part of the U.S. Department of Labor. Our mission is to achieve compliance and with this labor standards and protect the nation's workforce. That's a mouthful, but within itself, we work collectively with law enforcement when we run across issues in dealing with the human trafficking. My office is responsible for 67 counties in the state of Alabama. I have investigators in and out of employers' establishment. Right now, that's 9.3 million employers. That's nationwide. And I think some 143.3 million employees. So we stay pretty busy. We are anywhere from in the fields. Everyone loves to get the apples, the pears, the juice, and everything else. We have field workers that we are out in the field with, and we run across human trafficking in that nature. And what we do is that we partner with the law enforcement, state, federal, and we work hand in hand.
Great. Back to you. What types of services do you offer to law enforcement agencies, and can you tell us about a matter where your role made a difference to your law enforcement partners?
Well, so the Fusion Center is the intelligence repository for the state. So we have about 11 analysts, and we're all cross-trained in all crimes, but each of us have a specialty, and mine is human trafficking. So anytime a local agency or one of our state agents has an indicator that there is either a labor or a sex trafficking case, they'll call our Fusion Center. I can do a lot of deep background search on the victims and also the targets of the crime. Also, because trafficking in a lot of instances, both labor and sex, tends to be, victims that get moved from state to state. With our Fusion Center network, we have analysts and other Fusion Centers that I'm very much connected with that I can pick up the phone, find out, hey, has this either a victim or a target been in your state? What's happening with them in that state? So we're able to very quickly and easily share intelligence between our Fusion Centers, which we in turn turn around and give to our law enforcement partners that we're working with to assist them with the case as much as we can.
Thank you. Audrey Jordan, another question. How has the implementation of the State Human Trafficking Task Force brought about change in the way cases are being prosecuted or how victims are being viewed?
I think just being part of a task force in general, whether it be as a prosecutor or law enforcement or just in the public in general, is beneficial. We make connections. We're able to share information better with each other and spread awareness of what the issue is and how we need to address it. And that allows us to, gather information easier for prosecution of cases.
Very good. And Chris, you've worked across the spectrum in human trafficking. Is there anything different about the trafficking occurring here than in other states? I know you've touched on it a little bit, but if you could expand on that a little bit for us.
Yes. The experience that I've had domestically in California and Tennessee, in a lot of ways, looks a little bit different than probably a lot of the trafficking that's going on out here. One of the things from the course of those 20 different focus groups that I'll share that I was just, one thing that I'll share that I was surprised at is the prevalence of familial trafficking. So that's mom or uncle selling their daughter for rent or for dope. And the thing that struck me when I began to see that and kind of repetitive themes is that in a lot of ways, I think in more of the rural areas of our state, trafficking looks a lot more like maybe some of those international places. And that was one thing that was kind of an eye-opening to me, honestly.
Very good. For Kenneth, what types of services does the Department of Labor offer to human trafficking and labor trafficking victims, and what types of training programs are available to victims of human trafficking or labor trafficking?
The programs that we enforce under the Fair Labor Standards Act, not only do we make sure they are paid for the labor which they perform, we also want to make sure, in fact, that the victims, that we get them assistance, that we connect with our counterparts, we connect with state or federal, to put them in touch with some of our stakeholders that we have MOUs with, Memorandum of Understanding, to provide for them and get them out of harm's way.
Very good. Another question for the Fusion Center. I'm running out of questions, so we're going to have to do something here. How can the Alabama Fusion Center help law enforcement agencies work more efficiently? For example, if the I-20 corridor is the human trafficking #1 highway in the U.S. for trafficking, how might the Fusion Center assist agencies along that corridor?
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say that I-20 corridor is not the main human trafficking highway.
Anymore? We've learned something.
It's I-65, it's I-10.
It's all.
It's if you take a look at our state, we have interstates and major highways crisscrossing our entire state. If you take a look at the Polaris Project map of where the calls are coming in, where people are making reports of human trafficking, you'll see that they fall right along those corridors. I know I-20 has gotten a lot of attention since the Well House did their film on the I-20 superhighway. But honestly, pretty much every single interstate highway in our nation, you have human trafficking victims there being transported from one place to the next. So in terms of what we can do to help, I want to say that up until this summer, we only had a couple of agents that were assigned to work human trafficking cases in our state. The Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, through our new director, John Ham, decided we're going to up that commitment. And so we have just been assigned 7 agents that are working human trafficking cases, and they are now going through extensive training. We're going to have a lot more agents to assist our local agencies with these cases, because in many cases, they see the indicators, they might have a really good case, but they don't have the manpower to work those cases. And so that's what we're going to be able to do now with those additional agents that have been assigned to assist with those cases.
That's great. Great news. One of my big concerns over time with my research into Tennessee has like 7 to 10 human trafficking investigators assigned to their Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and they've had that for a couple of years, and we didn't have that strength in numbers, and I'm so thrilled about that. Thank you for sharing that.
Great news.
Audrey, from the Attorney General's office, are there specific changes in our laws that we could make that could assist human trafficking victims or even address demand?
I know this past session we made a few changes to the law that both addressed the demand side as well as attempted to give some relief to survivors of human trafficking. One of the changes that was made was that now you can charge buyers with first-degree human trafficking if the victim is a minor. Also, we amended our expungement statute for human trafficking victims to petition the court for relief when they've had a prior conviction for prostitution. For example, they can petition the court now to have that expunged from their record if they meet the criteria, and that kind of just allows them to go out and join the workforce without that hanging over their head.
Thank you. Let me ask you this question. Do you think we should offer a law into the legislative session next time, which would be in the spring, to make sure the buyers of exploited adults are the same as a trafficked person?
Well, I think at this point, I would have to look closer at the statute, but I think that the potential to charge under second degree is already there, if I recall the language correctly. But that is certainly something to explore.